Hello and welcome back to the Comic Books Matter podcast. I'm your host Jesse, and with me today is another returning guest and the writer of a new solar punk novel that he's currently funding on Kickstarter called The Tower Through the Trees. It's Sean Dillon.
Hello.
Sean, before we dive into just anything, give me the elevator pitch for the Kickstarter and the novel itself.
The Kickstarter for the novel, it's rather straightforward. It's a history book about the death of the last city. It's very much a wander through a text. Uh, Probably the best structural example I can come up with is it's probably closest to From Hell, but not as good because oh god, this is literally my first novel, and oh dear god, From Hell is amazing.
Yeah, I think of that Alan Moore novel that I always pass by but I don't pick up. Is it what's it called? Is it called Nazareth? I don't think it's called Nazareth, is it? Or
Uh,
Jerusalem?
yeah, Jerusalem. Oh God, Jerusalem.
Yeah, I mean, I like Alan Moore, but I don't know if I like Alan Moore in a novel sense. So like when I read the
I've read.
back, yeah,
Yeah, I've read Jerusalem. It's a lot.
yeah,
It's like it's very much an exploration of a small town community. This is more of a wander through a city, like when it's pitch black and you've just gone out of a pub crawl and you're trying to find your way home, but you don't really know the direction.
hmm
It's sort of like that. Uh,
is it story that's told narratively, kind of like uh, I always forget stream of consciousness of someone actually exploring the city, or is it like a historical, like here's the fact by fact type thing?
Mix of both. It's a half the book is following a single character by the name of Billy,
hmm
who inexplicably is the person who ends up killing the city. This isn't so much a spoiler. It's very much something that's established within, I believe, the first couple of chapters. And the other half is various found documents. It's detailing the lives of the city. One's a poem about police brutality. Another is a short story written by someone. A third is a written account of a performance art piece gone horribly, horribly wrong. There's some snippets and graffiti, and yeah.
it sounds super fascinating, and not to always compare things to other things, but I feel like that's what we do, and when we just try to
Yeah,
like make sense of something. But it's in the sense of like American Gods is telling that one narrative, but every so often he'll have the secondary chapter or the backup chapter in between like the main chapters of exploring that world just a bit more and kind of giving context for where everybody is.
yeah, there are some parts that I'd say it's more it yeah gets served just it might be more accurate to say it's a short story collection at
hmm
times, but it's generally you focus on this one character or trying to find his way through the city, trying to find a meaning for his own existence. And the problem is there's not a lot of information on the guy.
And I don't think I've ever read a solar punk novel. What technically is that genre?
I have absolutely no idea. Yeah, from what I gathered, it's very much post-apocalypse, but not miserable. Well, it's the assumption that life as we know it, yeah, it's very much me doing a book where it's what happens after the fall all of civilization as we know it. What happens when capitalism dies and everything and we have to make up with the rubble. Uh, with the specific reason why I chose solar punk was actually I was inspired to write the novel by an article written by a critic by the name of Sam Keeper,
hmm
who she wrote this article that I really liked about the genre that noted that it basically wasn't doing that well. A lot of it was just a it very nebulous and non-defined, and she offered a solution by throwing in cryptids, like a Bigfoot, the sat Bigfoot, chupacabra, various mytholog- ba- mythological creatures from that are supposedly are walking around the world. Those are established as part of the world, and it just got my brain rolling with the premise.
Yeah.
So, oh well. one of the things that happens before the events of the book, but is talked about within the book. Something happens, and basically lot of the stories we told throughout our lifetime end up becoming true. So there's fictional characters can sometimes pop up in the streets, though I made sure not to pick any of the copywritten ones or imply copywritten ones.
Yeah, you don't want big
Yeah,
corporations that shall not
right.
be named come knocking at your door.
Yeah, there's one that I might be scaring the edge, but I'm pretty sure is public domain. But it's a spoiler, so I won't go into it.
I mean, who knows? It could be a Sherlock Holmes situation where they say half of it's copyright, don't, and the other half isn't. It's still public domain.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Copyright law is so stupid.
Yeah, especially American copyright law.
Yeah. But so you were talking about beforehand that like the whole novel's on your blog and people can read it if they want to now. But you're doing this Kickstarter to get like more like people like professional editing done on it to make sure like it looks nice. Yeah, get
Yeah,
physical copies,
yeah,
stuff
I
like
think
that.
the best comparison is sort of like webcomics do this all the time, where they'll have where they'll have their books edited slightly. They'll run a Kickstarter for a physical copy of the book as well as eds to it. It's actually, you know, if there's something that you missed early on that needs to be refurbished, but this is probably going to be a larger overhaul with the text because there are I wrote this in 2017 and there
Mm,
are parts of it that I'm not happy with. It's some implications I put in there I didn't realize until reading it to get ready, reading it for while it was being posted onto the blog.
yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah, no, as someone who self-published before he was too well read or too well awake of social situations and such, I remember rereading like my first short story collection, and I'm like, man, I act like not consciously, just subconsciously, because just like it's drilled into us sometimes, like certain tropes and certain things that are really bad and tacky. I'm like, man, a lot of the people that die in this book are women, and that's not good. Like that's not
Yeah.
a good thing that I did, and I didn't mean to do it, but it's one of those things we're going back to, and I'm like, now I know better, and it's like, ooh, I don't know if I would feel comfortable with reading this, but now it's out in the open, so yeah.
Yeah.
So I get that. I get that. Like seeing pieces written like 3 years ago now, and going, ooh, that needs to be changed.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And the cool thing about your Kickstarter is I didn't have enough funds or the idea to do this, but if I do get enough funds and an idea before the end of the Kickstarter, I might change my pledge. But you're doing short critiques and essays for higher backers, and I think that's
Yeah.
extremely nice thing for you to be doing for the Kickstarter.
Yeah, it's very well. It's not just essays. It's also I will also take fiction commissions if you want me to do a short story based off of an idea you have.
And I think that's something I've never like. Maybe I haven't explored enough writing Kickstarters, but like that's never something I've seen before, and I'm like, ooh, that's a smart idea for someone who just has ideas but doesn't know how to get them on paper.
Yeah, it's I pretty much had some issues where I don't I'm freely aware that I am very much a new author in the medium.
Yeah,
I have somewhat of a following, but uh, not big fault. I don't have a huge following. Like I'm very niche. I'll freely admit. So if
yeah,
someone wants to uh, have their have me look at something, by all means, or yeah, I don't really have made much in terms of backlog to offer people, as it were.
yeah. And my the one I backed was the one that gets the one must imagine scot-free happy, which we've already talked about that on the first podcast you're on, which is a great collection of essays about Mr. Miracle. And it's so nice too that you have both of those as a physical tier too. And I just feel like out of the last few Kickstarters that I backed and stuff, this is one of the ones that has like the best rewards at the best tiers.
Hmm.
And how did you come up like the way that you were going to tier the system on that?
Well, I was learning my lessons from my previous Kickstarter with One Must Imagine Scott Free Happy. Two things I learned from that was one, don't whatever you do, do not do the friggin' do not do autographed copies of it because there are a lot of shipping costs. Because Amazon changed their shipping rules, so
Yeah.
there are shipping costs now. And two, you should probably be a bit more specific with it. For the One Must Imagine Scott Free Happy Kickstarter, I did a I talked to him. I said did it based off of the material I would be covering rather than the length of the commission, and a lot of people got a bit confused about my wording.
Yeah.
So I pretty much just structured it based off of how long the commission was. I'm gonna pull up the Kickstarter right now if you don't mind.
Yeah, don't take your time.
So for $30, you get a physical copy. For all the commission tiers, you get a physical copy of the book. But $30, you get 1,000-word commission. This is a short piece that probably get a short or essay on something of your choice. $50, you get a 2,000-word commission. This is the typical length of commissions that I usually do. $100 gets you a 5,000-word commission, which is slightly longer than I normally do. And for $150, you get a blog project, which is a multi-part look at something of your choice. It can be a theme, or it can be a question, or it could be a character, or it could be a short story. I'm actually currently writing a short story I was commissioned outside of the Kickstarter, or before it even started. On my blog right now. The short story is called Being Part Brokenhearted. The base pitch of it was do a crossover between where Rose Quartz from Steven Universe meets Death from Discworld.
Oh wow! So like it could be like when you say short story commission, literally it's like anything. It was like I have this weird, crazy crossover or concept of these characters. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're willing to pay for the entirety of the book, I will do a commission on Homestuck.
Yeah, part of me when I first learned about Homestuck, I'm like, man, I missed that completely, and like I don't know if I regret missing that or if I am happy I missed that.
Yeah, I did a chapter of Homestuck or the One Must Imagine Scott Free Happy, and it's neat. It's very niche, and I was probably a bit rude to make it the $1,500 one, and that was probably rude of me to do that.
Am I mistaken? Is one of the stretch goals on this? It might be on another Kickstarter or Patreon that you're a part of. But is it one of the stretch goals to do the Heroes in Crisis essays?
Oh yeah, that's the first stretch goal. That's the main goal is $1,500. I'll go through the stretch goals. I haven't actually had a chance to talk about them because I wanted to wait until we were got to the 2/3 part before I did a thread on the various stretch goals.
You don't have to reveal anything that you don't want to reveal yet. I just remember that.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go through the ones that I've already announced because there's 3 more that were very, very unlikely.
Yeah,
but I might as well. For if the Kickstarter hits $200, I will do a video essay exclusive to Kickstarter backers on the comic book series Heroes in Crisis, which is at once extremely flawed and quite frankly the most interesting comic DC has released since Final Crisis.
It is a book that I feel bad that I like so much because so many people hate it, but I can't help but like it a lot.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and
you're right. It's definitely very flawed, though.
Yeah, it's a hot mess, but I respect it, and I kind of wanted. I kind of came up with an idea for a video essay on it that can only be done as a video essay.
Yeah,
and no one is gonna figure out what my angle is on it, and if people want this to be a public video, then they have to get a Patreon of a person I follow by the name of Christine Kelly to get $500 a post, which you should be following her work because she is very good at what she does. She's currently serializing in a Patreon exclusive essay on the various Narnia books, which, oh man, her take is she has a very interesting relationship with Lewis.
I might need to back that myself. Add another patron
to
my growing list.
Yeah, she largely does essays on Kate Bush, which are very delightful.
Mm-hmm.
And the exclusive essays on her Patreon are some of the best writing on fiction I've seen. Like, my heart broke when I read her essay on The Shining. That's all I'm gonna
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
The next goal is We'll Always Have Yesterday, which is another old thing that I've written. It's a short. It's so back in college, I had to do a final project for a class I was taking, and I decided to write a script based following up an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah.
And I think I've made the script of it. It's a very formalistic script that probably needs to be shorn up a bit because it's been a couple of years, and I've also it's very much a script written with the assumption that it's never going to be made into an actual comic, so it goes way into detail about what the like. Yeah, I think the first panel has the Alan Moore Watchmen first panel thing.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I get what you're saying about that. Just like too much detail for anybody to actually like
Right.
work on. uh yeah, that and again, like me getting into Star Trek recently this year is like that's something that's super fascinating to me too.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was getting. I got really into Star Trek back during the end of my college years, and TNG is highly underrated. Like early TNG, especially.
Yeah.
There's some really good episodes in that first season.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to that. I started with Deep Space Nine on a friend's recommendation, and I'm almost done with that. And then I'm going to go all the way back to the original series and work my way up.
Yeah, I have opinions on the later eras of Deep Space Nine.
That's where I'm currently. I'm in the last 2 seasons currently.
Yeah, the last season is rough.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes because they're laying out some foundations. It is way off topic, but they're laying out some foundations that are going to go to interesting places, it feels like.
Yeah.
So the Kickstarter, how long late does it go for? Like
New Year's. It
New
goes
Year's,
till
okay.
New Year's. There are more goals that I think are worth going into. There are 3 goals on here for a project called Steven and the Stevens. This is my next blog project, which is a massive look at the television show Steven Universe,
Mm-hmm.
which I've sort of been circling around for a while. And I think basically every major project I've been doing has invoked Steven Universe at one point or another.
Yeah.
So this is a big project. The tiers that they are for would be making sure that the book version of it gets published. So if it hits $5,000, then you'll get volume 1, which, to give you an idea of the scope of the project, Steven Universe doesn't pop up until the end of volume 2.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, it's there's a lot to cover before we get into Steven Universe itself.
So it's just like going into backgrounds and kind of like things that led up to the idea of Steven Universe in a lot of ways.
Not quite. It's very much me exploring texts that are similar to Steven Universe.
Gotcha.
Like very much less literal texts that are related to Steven Universe and more thematically apt to talk about in the context of Steven Universe. So like Twin Peaks I'm gonna do an episode by episode look at Twin Peaks for this project.
Gotcha. It's kind of like there's parts of Imagine Scott Free Happy where like the comic itself is rarely mentioned, while but the context of that essay or such is about things that relate thematically to the comic,
Right,
and help
right.
you understand it better. Yeah, I get that. That's
Right.
really cool.
Yeah,
and I know you're working on a Hannibal thing too. Is that for Kickstarter?
that's part of Steven and the Stevens.
Gotcha.
The Hannibal one is like sometimes I'll just pitch out essay ideas on Twitter just to see how people would react to them, or just to see what they look like in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one. The 10,000 goal is probably something that would interest fans, and a massive, multi-hour long video essay called "Doomsday Clock is Garbage and Here's Why."
Yeah, that was the big one.
Yeah, that's $10,000, and I would probably be tormenting myself with this one because, oh god, I have to write about Doomsday. I have to make a video essay about Doomsday Clock.
Yeah.
in that genre of video essay, which I'm on record of saying that there's never been a good one in the traditional version of that video essay
Yeah.
format. Just they are all terrible for different reasons that would be way too long and arduous to go in depth into.
I think it was
But
you that retweeted today that like, oh, I think F is for fake is what all video essayers are trying to do.
yes, yeah, it's very much yeah, it's yeah, but the sheer awfulness of Doomsday Clock deserves the sneer of that style of video essay.
Yeah.
But the big one for me is the $13,000 and $18,000 or stretch goal, which is the Marvel Tarot, which is a project I've been contemplating for years doing.
Gotcha. What is the Marvel Tarot?
The Marvel Tarot would be a tarot deck based off of various characters from the Marvel universe.
Oh, okay.
So, like the $13,000 would just get you the major arcana, which it is very most Marvel Tarot's decks tend to focus on the mystical characters. Like
Yeah.
I think there was one an official one that was released a few years back that just that had that didn't have that just focused on Scarlet Witch, Doctor Strange, those types. But for this one, I would focus on the entire Marvel universe. The only one that I have explicitly figured out is Spider-Man, who would be the tarot card for death. Which
Oh, okay.
the reasoning for this is in tarot, death doesn't so much represent the ending. It's not even the last card in the deck, but rather it represents change. It means a moment where everything has come to an end and something new, and in turn something new begins. This is very much core to the Spider-Man character, or as often as Spider-Man has no status quo.
Yeah.
He basically nuked it in the Ditko era by graduating high school and going to college. He's been so many things over his life as a superhero, from school teacher to college student to mad scientist to possessed by Dr. Octopus, to whatever they're doing with Spencer's run. I have no.
I only read the first arc of Spencer's Run, and where it left off was he lost his degree and he was taking classes in like a college basement.
Yeah, from my gathering from Spencer's run, I think he's trying to revisit One More Day by way of J.M. DeMatteis, but it's very much the kind of cover of J.M. DeMatteis that immediately goes to Peter David, which is to say, it's not that great.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's not it's messy, but not for interesting reasons.
Yeah, I kind of miss reading Spider-Man. Not that like I couldn't pick up the book if I wanted to right now, but I have no investment or interest in what's happening to pick up the book. But I do miss the character.
Yeah, there's I just want Al Ewing or Steve Orlando or hell, Donny Cates to take over the book.
All three of them would give vastly different ideas, and some of them probably not the best. Some of them fantastic, and some of them really weird. But yeah, no, I would love just someone who's willing to take a risk with a character to take over.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, the problem with Spider-Man is you could tell that he's very much a character. He has a Superman problem, you know?
Yeah.
Oh,
no, I get you.
That where Superman is largely stuck in this one version of who Superman is defined in the 80s, where Spider-Man is defined by who he was in the 90s.
Yeah.
And which is to say, both of them are defined by John Byrne, which is a terrible thing to be defined by.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah. And the idea of Spider-Man just breaking out of the mold that feels like he's been in for such a long time would be nice, just because reading good runs within that mold and reading older runs before the 90s is like there's a charm to Spider-Man that no other character really has, I feel like. And it just, I would love to see that back.
The main issue with the Dan Slott era is that it's very much a run that should have ended way earlier than it did.
It's a very long run. Yeah,
like no one should have. I think it was close to a decade.
It wasn't it like 300 issues or something like that.
Might have been.
It was it was
Yeah, but
it was like the longest one anybody's ever had on a book. It feels like.
yeah, I think Inky's written at least a third of it.
Yeah, no, it's insane, and a lot of that too was written like when he first took over. It was written like 4 times a month. It was every week. It was a weekly book.
But he was co-writing it with other people.
Yeah, it just seems like it's a crazy that's a crazy amount of books for him to just work on.
Yeah, and especially given the documentary that came out a month back.
Yeah.
Oy.
So the writing of this back in 2017 for you, like how was from what you remember, how was the process writing on the blog back then? But two, how do you think your writing process has changed, like in more recent things?
Back in 2017, it wasn't serialized on the blog back in 2017. I was writing it as as something to do while I was working on my main project at the time, Fearful Symmetry, which was, speak of Spider-Man, a look at JMD Mateus's Craven's Last Hunt.
Gotcha.
And where I just spent the majority of that at one going into various 80s ephemera. So, the last issue of Watchmen, the first phase of Zenith, let me think about this. The Black Month, the 1987 financial crash. I'm pretty sure there was an episode of Transformers in there.
Mm-hmm.
That I mixed up with another episode of Transformers. There's also Joseph Campbell died in that period.
Huh.
Yeah, so I pretty much did that. Had a lot of fun with that project, but it's a very messy project.
Mm-hmm.
But with with uh with Tower Through the Trees, I was largely inspired by what was going on in my life at the time. Like I have one chapter has a sequence where a character who is heavily implied to be myself. Elf has a dream where he meets his old boss and has a conversation with that person, and based off of an actual conversation I had.
Yeah.
And I kept so it's half remembered details of a conversation that that just happened and recently. He Another one was sort of just me walking through my hometown and just rewriting it as sort of a post collapse world. Was that look like? Some of it was written in one sitting. I feel like I'd probably be able to write longer in my more recent phase. Like I could do, I don't know, like when I was starting out, I was having difficulties actually writing the books.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'd write 500 words and then I'd have to stop. Up and to give an idea for readers, 500 words is about a page.
Yeah.
Like 4 or 5 paragraphs. So I'd be writing. And I think I'm a faster writer, and I think I'm also a bit more keen on what I miss is when I revisit it instead of just having to use other people as my handicap.
Yeah, no, like the older I get and the more I have time to write, which seems to be I lose more time nowadays than I used to. But it does seem like now when I sit down to write, like I can write faster, and I think that's a nice, slowly skill to be building up when I'm me personally trying to work up to a novel. And it's exciting to see someone who I have now started to look up to, like you reading One Must Imagine Scott Free Happy. I'm reading this, and I'm like, why can't I find the words to do something like this? It's fun and exciting to see you put out a novel, even though it's something you wrote in the past. It's just fun to see you put that out and be like, this is someone I look up to now doing something cool.
Yeah, it's it's a lot of work, and sometimes
Yeah.
you just look at your work and go, "Oh God, what have I done?" Like when I was going through the eds for One Must Imagine Scott Free Happy, I was just going, "Oh my God, why did I write it like this? Oh God, I didn't mean to write it like that." Wow, I really do Orion dirty. Yeah, I really should probably even clarify what I'm saying about Orion, so I don't argue that he's literally a fucking Nazi and some of the implications of that story, especially with Orion's backstory. which
Yeah.
are kind of fucky.
Yeah. And like the revising anything is always kind of like looking at the one a mess you made, but also at the same time trying to find out like how much of this personal thing that you've been cultivating you have to kill off now.
Yeah.
And I feel like both those aspects of revising your own work is just hard. It's hard to get through, and it's hard to sit down and force yourself to like hard examine the things that you create.
Yeah.
I do have a few questions I wrote down that I kind of want to pick your brain on and kind of dissect. And one of them is again about your writing again, but it's about favorite pieces of writing. And I know with some writers and some people who just create things in general, they don't have a favorite thing. Either the new thing's their favorite thing, or they feel like they're never good enough to have a favorite thing. But I'm just curious, do you have a favorite piece of writing of yours that you've made, and why it would be your favorite?
I have a couple actually. Uh, I think the work I've been doing with Panel X Panel recently has been very good. I especially like the one I did for the Judge Dredd article. Dream on Creep, I think is what they ultimately called it.
Yeah.
It I feel that's me grappling with a lot of ideas I've been having to deal with for a while. Just
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those articles where you just realize where you can finally express something you've been thinking for a while. There's an article in there, the appendices article in One Must Imagine Scott Free Happy, My Own Utopia, which is on the Omega Men and science and utopias at war, which I found, yeah, I felt like that was that was another one that I just, when I was writing it, I just went, oh my god, this is so great. Yes, I'm doing great. And when I read back at it, I think, yes, this is fucking amazing. Oh my god, how I write this. Uh, from um uh from the Tower Through the Trees, I think there's a poem in there called Worst Man Rise, which I basically steal the structure from an Elizabeth Bishop poem,
Mm-hmm.
whose name, I think, it has a very long name. Each line, you start with the first stanza is one line, the second stanza is two lines, and they repeat each but with a slight difference,
Yeah.
and sets the structure of it. And I really like it, especially how I turn it around in the final stanza. It just, the sheer turn I have there is, I really like that one. There's sorry, I'm thinking about,
Oh, it's fine. I
yes.
blank on it when someone asks me a question all the time.
Uh, I really like the Department of Truth article I wrote for what's the website? Uh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I'm usually better with this than I am. Uh, I wrote an article on the Department of Truth um, for Comfort Food Comics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like it's basically me creating a conspiracy theory that Grant Morrison tried to gave Donald Trump COVID.
Honestly, if anybody could pull it off, it's probably Grant. Um,
Yeah, and then there's also the other article I wrote for Comfort Food Comics. Uh, it's in the Trees, which I co-wrote with Ritesh Babu.
mhm. And that's something that is always exciting too when you two collaborate, because like out of everybody I follow that is critique writers or just really picks apart the comics and movies and stuff, you two always have some of the best takes, and it's always fun to watch you bounce off of each other live on
Yeah,
Twitter.
yeah, you should see the DMs.
Yeah. And that kind of moves into actually the next question I had too, is like we see daily and sometimes hourly, if we're talking about today or this week in general, that comics kind of shift and grow at a rapid pace, and like things either get better or they get worse, but they don't tend to keep on those paths. They tend to either go one way or the other and then flip back and go the other way.
Hmm.
um
Same
and
could be said for life.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, comics are very much like life, which I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing. But as you as a critic, though, do you feel like it's getting easier or harder for you to critique comics or series or just things like that in general?
Well, it's very much a thing of practice. The more you do something, the easier it gets. It's a lot. So I'm not sure if the environment is allowing me to approach these easier than I was back in 2017, but the experience I've had certainly has.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always curious when things are good, like how hard it is to critique something that's good. I mean, nothing's ever perfect. There's always something wrong, or there's always something to at least be discussed. But I always wonder when like something like Immortal Hulk, like that. Everybody, I haven't read it myself personally. Yeah, I know that's a thing that I need to get on. But like, I know everybody loves that book, and
Oh man.
it's like, can you critique something that's so universally loved?
Yes, yes, you can.
Yeah, so I'm just curious when it comes to like the positives like that. Like, how do you go about critiquing and examining?
Well, I actually find writing about the positive stuff's easier than and the negative stuff. In fact, writing about the negative stuff has actually gotten me into trouble with certain people who like to name search themselves.
Ah, yes, the famous name search.
Yep.
I've seen it recently.
Yep.
um,
Yeah. Surprisingly, I've not had Scott Snyder in my DMs.
yeah, like, and that was disappointing too when I learned that he would do that for some bad reviews. It's like I understand like why you're name searching, but it's the instigating after you find it. Like I get you want to see what people say about you, and I would do it too probably if I was a writer, but I would not be going underneath going, "Hey, I'm here now," say it to my
Yeah.
face. Like that's the crossing the line part. Like that's the part where you're like, "Hey, no one
Yeah.
asked for you to do this."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But uh, actually, writing negative pieces is actually difficult for me. It just feels like I'm just saying this is bad and the reason why are very obvious.
Yeah.
Whereas with positive stuff, I can go into why it works, or the art, how the relates to the images, how the layering structure something. There's an article I wrote recently where I was comparing two works that I feel, it's not out yet. It's probably be out, I think, January,
Hmm.
so I'm not going to go into specifics. Two works approach have a similar structure where they'll have a moment of horror followed by a single page splash of with just a word on it. And I contrast how they approach that differently. One has the word in a jagged word balloon,
Hmm.
with the text in a different color than usual. Like it's red text and it's text, whereas the other one is a black and white comic, so instead of having a word balloon, it looks as if the page itself has been punched in the gut, with the word stuck in the middle.
And which is this going to be on your blog or is this going to be on?
This is a Panel X Panel article.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and anybody who isn't reading Panel X Panel should really read Panel X Panel because I feel
Oh
like
yeah,
that's just chock full of. If you love comic essays and comic critiques and stuff, I feel like that's a
yeah,
good place to begin a
yeah.
lot of that.
And they take submissions and they pay very fairly. So like start. I recommend starting out small. Like they do top five. They have a top five feature that it, where you just write 100 words on five things that you like in comics. Like one was writing teams. Another is Spider-Man arcs, and so if you have five things you like, five five examples of a common theme in within comics, just submit that to Haas, and yeah.
And it's one of those things too where I hope because it feels like comic critique gets kind of thrown to the side a lot in a lot of the bigger publications because like especially like nowadays it feels like a lot of the bigger publications aren't even posting comic book stuff to begin with. They're just posting
Yeah.
stuff to rile people up. Like gosh, what was it Newsarama that just posted the things like is Jaws a good movie?
Yeah. Oy.
And
And
everybody's like we get it, we get what you're trying to do here, but do you have to do this?
yeah, and then there's CBR does that all the time.
Yeah, CBR is probably worse, but like even like most of the ones that used to be like highly respected like are now kind of going that way, and it feels kind of frustrating. And like there's really no way to save it because like I get it, those places need to pay the advertising space. So the only way to pay the advertising space is to get those clicks into the space already. So for
Yeah.
places like Panel X Panel or Adventures in Poor Taste or other smaller blogs like that, or publications like that, it's like it's really fun to see them still trying to do critiques the best they can.
Yeah.
Um, and well, my final question, the ones I wrote down, but this isn't like the end of the discussion because I have another one I just want to talk about too. But for you, do you ever see? I hope you see yourself doing this because I love to see what it looks like. But do you ever see yourself writing Spider-Man?
Yes, I have a lot of ideas for Spider-Man.
How can we get you in the Marvel offices?
Well, first you have to get me. Well, first I have to have a writing sample as a comic, so I need. Unfortunately, I can't draw for shit, so I need
Yes.
someone. I need someone to work with me as an artist on the comic. It just doesn't have to be too long. That's part of the reason why I have the. We'll always have yesterday tier on there, so that I can have a sample of my writing as comics.
Yeah.
Picks up. Okay, if we gel well, I could write enough. Hopefully, work together with the artists on other comics, maybe more short form stuff, maybe longer form, and or maybe some other artist who's interested in working with me. He, then there, and then I from there I have to get experience within Marvel, within various comic book companies. Probably, I think like a. Hmm, 2000 AD might have open submission. I think 2000 AD has open submissions. Probably do some short form comics. Do maybe do comics through Vault or
Hmm.
other publication or Image or what have you.
Put an
And
anthology together and get
yeah,
one of them to publish that for you.
yeah, do an anthology comic, and then from there keep getting noticed, keep getting hyped, get an acclaimed comic, and maybe I'll be able to get onto an ancillary Spider-Man title by the time Nick Spencer leaves in 2051.
You get to do a point one issue.
Yeah.
Gosh, those are sometimes the most fun and sometimes the most just annoying things to read are the point one issues at Marvel. Um, but that is the thing. Like writing comics is always like an end goal for a lot of people, and
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated by people's like game plans of getting there. And it feels like you in particular, you can do it. You can get there just because you understand the medium so well.
Yeah.
Um, the next thing that I'm curious about is, do you have another novel kind of planned out or set aside for when you're done with your big essay projects?
I mean, I have several ideas for novels. One is I had this idea for one that sort of got tossed aside. That I have vague ideas for novel rather than
Mm-hmm.
specific ones. When I'm doing specific ones, that's when I figure I'm gonna be doing this. It's like right now I'm focusing more on fiction rather than full on novels. I'll sort of just get used to the form of writing fiction rather than in contrast to nonfiction,
Yeah.
and a few anthologies here and there that I've applied for.
And for you, when you're writing fiction and nonfiction, like I know with any good writer worth their weight, it's like it's indulging and researching through the medium itself or other ways versions of the medium. For you, how much effort do you put into other like reading or watching different things, or even like listening to music or looking at art? Like how much time is spent doing that before you get to work on something?
Depends on the project. For example, for One Let's Imagine Scott Free Happy, I'd spend an entire week doing the research before I started writing the article for each chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Or just guys basically spent at the majority of the time of those of the first which took about 6 months to fully 6 to 8 months depending on how you count, because one of because the there was a file appendix essay on the Omega Men, which I had to watch basically the majority of Deep Space Nine.
Gotcha.
I'm for, and yeah, it's. I also had to read Starship Troopers, which is quite frankly the worst book I've ever read.
Um, it's weird going on these tangents, but it's so fascinating because you say something and I'm like, oh yeah, that reminds me of this, and it's so fascinating to hear someone say like this is literally the worst thing I've ever read, or maybe the worst
Yeah.
book ever invented. In my college creative
Yeah.
writing class, my teacher opened up saying, like, the worst book that has ever been written is the Da Vinci Code, and I will never read another
Mm.
book by him. And I'm like, okay, that's how we're opening up this class. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, it's just the prose is boring, and it's just the majority of the book is spent on military nonsense. That's just let's look at my guns sort of thing,
Yeah.
where it's just so dull and uninteresting. And you don't care about the characters. The prose is turgid and boring, and its politics are fucking evil.
Yeah. And I I'm curious because have you seen the movie too? Then
I love the movie.
yeah, I'm curious, like, well, how does that compare then? Because I know the movie's very kind of satirical in some ways, where it like
Yeah, the
uses
movie.
politics,
Yeah, the movie recognizes that humanity is kind of fucking evil in this book.
and they kind of just go with that perspective and like double down on it.
Yeah, they just it's oh man.
Well, Sean, like I'm really excited to get the book in my hand because I just like reading, and I'm excited to get One Must Imagine Scott Free Happy physically in my hand too, because that was such a good collection of stories.
Yeah.
But the thing that's most exciting is the goals that this Kickstarter has and what can come out of it for you and for people who enjoy your work. Um, and so I'm excited to see it hopefully reach those goals, and hopefully people that listen to this will like check it out and at least read all the stuff that is attached in your previous work to kind of get a feeling for it, and hopefully
Yeah.
they will join me in supporting it and getting some of those great rewards. But where can people find your other work, and where can they find you in general?
I can be found in general at DeathCraze2000 on Twitter. My writing is found on the King in Red and Blue the King in Red and Blue blogspot.com, and on comic, and I've begun writing reviews for Comic Book Herald.
Awesome. And for this show, there will be a post thing after the episode that will plug all my stuff because I feel weird doing that in the middle of an interview. But uh, seriously, read all of Sean's work if you can. It will be linked underneath all the social stuff for this when this gets posted. It's some of the best critique work that you can read out there about comics if you love comics. And the thing about it, what's so fascinating about it too is, yes, it's about comics, but there's so much other stuff he packs into everything, and that's what's so exciting about it all.
Yeah.
Sean, thank you for being on here and talking to me about this again. The Kickstarter again goes until the end of the year. Please check it out and donate if you have the resources and it sounds interesting to you, because I think it's really worth the effort right now. And remember, everybody, especially during this time of year, and not to, like, as Chip Zdarsky said, but it did not make it to the recording, not to the bad people, don't do this to the bad people who treated us bad all year long, but be kind to one another during this time. And thank you guys for a wonderful year of the podcast. This is probably going to be the last one of the year, but just thank you for listening and supporting the show.
And incidentally, a very happy Christmas to all of you at home.
Yes, and happy holidays to everybody who doesn't celebrate. Just enjoy time if you can with family. If you can't social distance from them, try to Zoom with them, etc. I know how hard everything is. So again, hopefully this podcast gave you joy this year. Hopefully Sean's work can give you joy at the end of the year. Please check it out. And again, just enjoy the holidays, everybody. You can find the Comic Books Matter podcast on Twitter at Comics Matter Pod. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/comicbooksmatter. You can email me at comicbooksmatter@gmail.com. And if you have any questions for guests, any stories about how comic books impacted your life, or want to be a featured guest on the show, you can reach me out at all three of those social media platforms. The logo for the show is by my friend Steven, and the theme of the show is done by David Szesztay, and I got it on freemusicarchive.com. Tell a friend about the show, leave a review, spread the word. I would just love to have more people listening to the show, and remember, be kind to one another.